Hello world, welcome to episode 8 of our Monorepo series. In the last video, we covered a few things. So we covered how to publish a wheel to Piper registry using pants, and we also covered how to publish the same wheel to the Google Cloud Artifactory using pants. In today's video, we'll cover how to deploy the application using pants. If you remember previously, we created a Docker file. We had a simple API that we built, and we created a Docker file. And we also built the Docker file. We published the Docker file to Google Cloud Registry, Google Cloud Container Registry. In today's video, we'll kind of build on that idea and use that and see how we can deploy our application to Google Cloud. To be specific, Cloud Run, Google Cloud Run service. And if you don't know what Google Cloud Run service is, Google Cloud Run service is an offering offered by Google Cloud for deploying your application using Docker containers. And that application is pretty much a serverless application, and it can scale down to 0 or scale up depending on the demand, as well as you're being charged on how much it's being used. So enough talk, let's kind of get into the code and walk through a few things. So if you remember, this was the API we built. The API had a few routes. It also had a Docker file last time that we built, and I just created this YAML file to use to deploy. And this is similar to like a Kubernetes manifest. If you don't know what a Kubernetes manifest is, another story for another day. But pretty much this just declares what we want to deploy, that this is a service we want to deploy to the Google Cloud, and then this tells the location we want to deploy, the different regions that Google Cloud has their servers located. And this tells the specific location I want to deploy this: US Central, you have Asia region, you have Europe region, just different places. So this just specifies that this is where we want to deploy to. Okay. And then this tells the image we want to deploy, and this also tells the version of the image we want to deploy. From last video, we're able to publish our Docker image to a Docker registry. And this is just the metadata to describe the application, nothing fancy. And then this is the name of the service you want to deploy. And then we also have a port. This is the port that it runs on, that we expose from internal to external. And this is the port that it just runs on for us to be able to access our application. So let's try to deploy this. If we go to Google Cloud, we'll see that this already exists. So let's go to Google Cloud, confirm that this already exists, and then we'll try to deploy this using Google Cloud. So first of all, you need to set up the gcloud CLI, and for you to set that up, you have to install it. It's just a CLI that allows you to interact with Google Cloud. So you can call the CLI and then call commands against that CLI. It will do authentication for you, and it will interact with Google Cloud for you. So the way to install this is you can follow this instruction. The links will be in the description below. You can follow this instruction. If you're on Windows, pretty much just download the installer and just click through, and then we install it. If you're on Mac, you can click on any of the versions that you use, the platforms you use, and again, pretty straightforward to install this. Okay, so once you have the gcloud CLI installed, for me, I already have that installed. So if I go back to and I do gcloud version, it tells me that I already have it installed. So you see that I pretty much have the gcloud SDK installed. Okay, so once that is installed, let's verify this and see if this exists on the container registry. So I'll go to my Cloud Console and I'll go to dashboard, and I can go to things under CI/CD. Then I can go to container registry, and then based on the container registry, I can see the Docker registry that we have here, and I can see the task API here, and then I can see other ones that I've deployed previously in my previous videos. So we see that version already exists, or that tag already exists. 1.22 already exists here. I can close this. So it means that we can actually use this version that already exists, right? So let's try to deploy this just using the gcloud CLI. So I'll go back to my VS Code, clear this, and to deploy this using the gcloud CLI, we'll run the gcloud run command. So run gcloud run services replace, and then we specify the name of the deployment. I think I'll do source python task, and then deploy.yaml, and then run. Good. So we'll see that this has been deployed successfully, created the revision, and then they expose the routes and give us a URL for us to use to access our application. Let's go to Google Cloud and see if this actually was deployed there. So I'll go to my dashboard and go to Cloud Run, and great. So we see that this has been deployed. This was deployed there, and this required authentication. We can always change that subsequently. This authentication, just says that the user has to be logged into an email to access this. You can always change that from the YAML file if you want. So let's click this, and let's look at the YAML description. So we can see pretty much the YAML description that we specified here. We see that located here, and it also added a few more data for us. It's just typical with the Google Cloud Cloud Run. So let's try to access this URL, but before we do that, we have to change the security settings here, because currently it's only on authenticated user. So only those users who are authenticated on the system can access this URL. And for us to make it easier, just for now, for demo purposes, we'll allow everybody to be able to access this URL. So I'll just change the settings here to allow, and then I'll click save. Then I can copy the URL, and I can go, and then I can do task, and great, I'm able to get a blank page. If we go back to our VS Code and we'll go to route, we'll see that if you do a get task, if there's nothing there, it just returns to you an empty list, right? And we can do a health, to be sure that this is working. So I'll just do health, so we see that the status code is up. Great. So this shows how to deploy to Cloud Run using the CLI. Let's take this a step further and see how we can use pants to build on this idea, only deploy what has changed. So say for instance, some portions of the code has not changed. So like, for instance, my calculator lib is the only thing that changed here. There's no point to actually deploy everything. I only want to work on this. And sometimes, a code might change here that's not even related to deployment. and I don't want to redeploy everything, right? And this is where Pants comes in with the cache. It's able to cache things for you. It's able to run only what is changed, right? So let's see how we can use Pants to deploy this. So go to the documentation on Pants, and then we'll take it from there. So I'm on the Pants documentation, and we'll see that Pant doesn't have anything for Cloud Run, while it has other plugins for other things. For Cloud Run, to be specific, it doesn't have plugins, but it has what's called macros, and it also has what's called Adhoc tools. And we can use these Adhoc tools as building blocks to be able to integrate third-party tools into our CI workflow. And if you kind of go through this, you'll see that the Adhoc tool allows you to execute runnable task inside a Pant sandbox. So you can pretty much execute the same code I was executing prior in my terminal. Pant can execute that for you, and it will do that only when something changes. So if the version changes, or maybe you change the code and then you had to change the version, then this will redeploy. Okay, that's one of the benefits of Pants. So let's go back and see how we can integrate Adhoc tools into our workflow. So I'm in my VS Code, and for us to do this, we need a few things. So first things first is we need to know what version of the image is being built, right? So if I do Pants and I do Pants package everything, this will build a Docker image for me, and you'll see that it builds a Docker image. It tells me the information about the Docker image in this case. So I'll just kind of format this to make it better. So it tells me the version of the Docker image that has been built. This is the tag. You can see the tag there that's been built. So pretty much this is what I need to deploy. Now this can change time to time as you're building, as you're working on software and you're releasing. Maybe today this is 1.2.2. As you're working on software, releasing multiple software, this could change. So let's see how we can read this specific tag and try to deploy this specific tag to our GitLab. Sorry, not to our GitLab, to Cloud Run. So if I come to the Adhoc tools, go back here, I'll see the way I'm able to set up the Adhoc tools. I'm able to give it a name and then declare a runnable, pass an argument, and pass an output, right? I'm able to do that. So for me to be able to read the version of the Docker image, I would need to write some helper code to be able to do that, because Pants doesn't have anything built in to do that. So I'll go back to my VS Code here, and I'll close this. Minimize this. So now in my VS Code, I would need to write a Python code that will be able to read this tag, and when it reads this tag, it will be able to replace the name of the image in the deployment. So if I go to my deploy here, I can pretty much use a placeholder for this, because this could change anytime, right? Like this version could be incremented every time you want to release because you have changed the code. So we use a placeholder here for this, and I'll just call this name for now. And the goal of our Python script will be to read this entire thing, and once it reads it, it'll be able to kind of read this as well, then understand what the tag is and what the name is, and then replace this essentially before it does a Cloud Run deploy. So I'll go to Python directory and create a new target. I'll call this deployment. And inside there, I'll create a file called gcloud.py. Okay. And I already wrote the code prior, so I'll just paste the code and explain what the code is. So if you scroll to the very top, I'm using this library. This is the library I'm using for YAML processing. And then also I'm using ActPass. ActPass comes with Python out of the box. It's just something that allows you to pass, variables like dash, 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 whatever you want into a Python script. So I have this, which enables me, pass, variable into my Python script. Then I declare the variables I want to accept. I want to accept the JSON path. So the JSON path refers to this one, where this is stored. So if you look at this dist folder, the way pants work is pants runs everything in an isolated box. Everything runs in an isolated box. So this folder can actually tell you how the isolated box structure would look like. And also you can use other commands to, preserve the sandbox, so you can go review how it looks like. So, but usually this dist folder can give you insight to how it looks like. So this is source.python, the task_API. And then this is the path to the Docker file. So if I come here back, and then this is, I'm specifying input, I say it's required, and then I'm saying this is the path to the JSON, just a description. Then I also specify the YAML. The YAML refers to this deploy.yaml that we use, and I can say path to .yaml that we use, and then the manifest path, and we can call this anything you want. Just make sure that when you're consuming it, you're passing the right variable. The manifest path here, what it does is it specifies the path where I eventually want to write this final variable, this final file to, because I'm going to replace this at runtime, and then I will write to a file location that I can use to deploy to Cloud Run. So I can give this a better description to final file, and then I can just do args. The args will get all the argument that I want based on the variables that I declared, and then you can use underscore, so the dash here will become underscores. This is just a nicer way to pass variables to a Python script. Then I have a log here. This is just print out. I can use a logger if I want. For simplicity, we just use a printout. I sleep for 20 seconds, and the purpose of this sleep is to be able to test the cache capability of Pant. I want to show that, yes, of course, Pant is able to cache this process and is able to pull, the data from the cache when this file has not changed and just return to me the result. Then, this bad coding practice. So move this guy to the top. It's just kind of standard practice to always have your imports at the very top. I think the code's not even being used, so I can remove it. And then I extract the image, and if you go to this just goes to read the registry, read the tag, and read this. So I'll put this side by side. So if you see this side by side, I'm going to say read the registries, and this is a list. Get me the first thing in the list, right? And then get me the tags and get me the first tag and then get me the name, right? Because pretty much this could change from time to time. Okay, so that's what this is just returning. So it reads the JSON and then drills down to registries, which matches this, the first index, which is this, the tags, which is this, the first index, because this is a list, which is this, and then gets the name, which is this. So it's just extracting that from the JSON for me, and then returns that, then I'm able to use that name to update this and update and replace this. All right, so if I go to my update function, I see that accepts the YAML path, accept the image name that we got, and then the target, which is the file path we want to write the final output to. So if I drag this one here, and then if I look at what this is, it's just reading the YAML, and then go spec, template, spec, containers. So I go spec, I go template, I go spec, and then I go containers. Then inside this containers, I have, a list, and that's what this dash in YAML signifies, that this is a list. So based on that, sorry, not a list. It signifies that it's an object type, and not a list. Signifies an object type, right? So based on that, I can pretty much iterate through each of these containers, because you can have like multiple, right? You could do something like image, and then you can specify another image, right? So I'm just iterating through each of this, and then I'm saying which of them has the placeholder that I'm using, right? And then I find the one that has the placeholder, then I change it to the image name that I passed, and then I write the file finally to the target destination that I want. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. This is just a simple Python script to help me do pretty much a find and replace, right? You could use bash script if you want. You could use anything you want. So now that I have this, I can clear my terminal. I need to let Pants know that there's a new file that I just created. So I can do Pants Taylor, and then it knows that I just created a new file. It's able to say, okay, well, you just created a new file, and it creates a build for that file. So I'll give this, some more information. I'll say the source, because this is just a single file. This deployment is just a single file, so I'll call it, instead of sources, I'll just use Python source, much easier. Then I'll say the source is my gcloud.py, so now Pants knows that this is a source. And then I'll say the name of this target is extract underscore name. You could give this any name you want. Extract version. So pretty much this will help us to run this gcloud file, and once it helps us run the gcloud file, then it's going to output to whatever we want. Let's kind of give this a try. So I'll clear this, and then I'll say Python source Python and deployments gcloud.py, and if we run this, it will throw an exception for us, telling us the path, these variables that will specify, and telling us that they are required, right? And that's based off on this code that we say they're all required, right? So if I clear this again, and then run this, and then do dash dash JSON dash path. And the JSON path is, let's use this for example. So I'll copy the relative path. This is the JSON path. Then I'll do dash dash YAML dash path, and I'll copy this YAML, which is the deployment, yeah. And then this manifest, which is where I want to store the final file. And we'll say we want to store the final file in, let's just store it in source Python deployment, and then we'll say past.yaml. So let's run this and see what it does. It sleeps for 20 seconds and then it's completed. So we'll see the YAML was passed and this was being replaced successfully. Currently we're doing this manually, but we want to do this with Pants. So Pants is able to do this dynamically in our CI. So I'll clear this and then I'll just delete this for now. Move to trash. Then I'll go back to my build here and I'll declare the Adhoc tools, declare the resources that are required to be able to run this. So the first thing that we need is the resource. So we need the resource, and this resource will tell me that this YAML file is just telling Pants that this YAML file need to be tracked because this is a resource. So I'll say deploy that. So I'll call this deployment underscore spec. And then I'll say the source is equal to deploy.yaml. So now Pant knows that it needs to track this deploy.yaml and put that in the isolated box. Then I'll say I do have some dependencies. And the dependency that I have is this. The reason is I want the Docker image to be built first, and it should be published to as well first before I then do a deploy, right? So that's what that means, right? So this entire stage would have been done before I even copy this deployment.yaml to this isolated box. The next thing I need is I need to use the Adhoc tool. So if we go back to the README, we'll see that the Adhoc tool is what you can use to call a runnable. A runnable is pretty much a Python file that you can run, or anything in Pants that you can run directly. Most of the time, maybe a Python file, a source file that you can run. Okay, so we'll go back to, or we can just copy this and make edits. So copy that and we'll give this a name that we want. So we'll give this the name of extract underscore version. And this Adhoc tool is just saying that, well, the name of this Adhoc tool or this target is extract version. And what this target will do is this target will run this Python file that we declared here. That's what this target will do. We'll run this Python file that we declared here. So we'll say source Python, because that's the directory that it's located in. You can see that source Python deployment, and that's where it's located. So source Python deployment, then it's called extract underscore version, and that's the name. Yeah, okay. So the next thing we need to do is to pass in those variables that I showed earlier in the example, right? So we can say the first one is JSON path, and let's kind of format this better. So JSON path, the JSON path I want to use is, I want to say the current root directory. This is just a placeholder in pants that gives the name of the sandbox, because you cannot know the name of the sandbox, right? So this is just a folder in pant that tells the name of the sandbox. So I can say the name of the sandbox, that's Python, or I can even just copy what I had before and pretty much just copy this. So in the sandbox, we don't need to specify dist. The reason is the sandbox will already contain this folder path at the root, so you don't need to specify dist again. So if you go source.python task, and then this is the JSON, which pretty much refers to this JSON, right? Everything in this dist will exist in the sandbox. This folder will not be there. All of this will just exist in the sandbox. So you can pretty much access this way. Okay. Then the YAML path, I can copy this. And then I can do okay. Let's see if we can format this. It looks weird. No idea why I can't format this. Well, that's fine if I can't format this. Okay, so then we pass in this past. So this tells where the final file should be written to. Okay. So I want my final file to be written to, I want it to be written to this folder, this specific folder, but I want it to contain, you know, the name of this YAML, but it should be written to this specific folder. You can decide where you want to write it to, but you know, for simplicity, I just chose this specific folder. So I'll just copy that. And then I can take out deployment, and it gets right to that specific folder. So I can call this parsed manifest.yaml, just, you know, make it easier to understand what I'm doing. So my output directory, the output directory will tell what directory you want to pass from one stage or from one target to the next, and pretty much where all your content will be written to, and you know, that folder will exist in the next target. So in this case, this is where I'm writing to. So I'll say this is my output directory, because that's where I'm writing this file to. So this will exist, you know, this folder will exist in the next target. And then the deployment, the execution dependency is, I need this to be ready before I can run this. The reason is, this is my deployment.yaml, so this has to be ready before I run this. So if this changes, the entire thing is going to change. It's going to run again. It's not going to go to cache. It's going to run again if that changes. Okay. I forgot the roots directory. Yeah. So we need the roots directory. Yeah. And the YAML path. Okay. So the next thing is this execution dependency. We can replace that. I got that from this deployment YAML. So this deployment YAML has to exist for this to be able to run. And we have our root directory, which is the current directory wherever we are. And then the output dependency, we actually don't need this, so we can take this out. So let's run through this again. We declare the name, and then we say what we want this Adhoc tool to run is to run this Python script. This Python script takes a few things. It takes in the JSON path, which is this Docker file that tells us the version. And we specify that to say the root directory, which is the isolated box. And then we say it exists inside this place, just kind of following this. And then we specify the name. Right. Then we see the YAML file, again, following the folder structure here. This is where the deploy.yaml lives. It's in the source, Python, and then task API. So that's this one we specify here. The final destination file is after this deploy has been updated to the version name, it writes this final thing to a folder, right? So, and that's what this is about. So we specify that, right? And then, of course, we say, do we want to put logs? True, we want to put logs, so it's going to show all the logs in the console. The last thing we need here is we need to call the function here, or the CLI, pretty much this, to be able to deploy. And to do that, we have to use a run shell command. So the run shell command, again, this is in the documentation in pants. The run shell command will allow you to be able to run any binary that you have. So you can pretty much call that binary and it can run, you know, that binary that you have. So we'll specify the name. I will say deploy GCP. I think it's kind of a good name. And then we'll specify the command that I want to run. The command I want to run is pretty much this command last time. But this time we'll do a simple trick. We'll specify the root directory, which is the isolated box that pants uses for every run. And then we'll specify this output directory that will say all our files live in. And then we'll specify pretty much this is where it's written to. So we can just copy this and say that's where you should write to YAML. Okay. And then for this to run, this has to run prior. So if this changes, you know, if there's any change, it will rerun, else we'll just pull the last run from the cache. Okay. So my execution dependency is this. And then I can also specify a tag. A tag will just allow me to say I want to run this specific thing. You know, I'll say deployment. Maybe subsequently in our CI we'll use the tag, but for now we'll just, you know, add it there. Great. So let's try to run this, and let's also take advantage of the tag that we create here. Think of the tag as just a way to filter a specific thing that you want. So say pants run everything, and except for where the tag is equal to deployment. So it will run only those things that the tag is equal to deployment. This is just a way to, you know, reuse everything. In the CI, you would just say pants run, and then you can say I just want to run this deployment thing. This is because pants doesn't have, you know, a way to deploy currently. They have, I think they have an experimental version, an experimental goal called deploy, but I don't think that's yet in production to be used. So for now, we just use the tag to kind of filter to the specific. So we see that this is sleeping some seconds. Good. So we see this was able to deploy. The reason why it was taking that long because we have a sleep here, and you can see, the logs here, sleeping for some seconds. So let's run this one more time and see if it's going to take that long. Great. So we see this time is faster. The reason is Pants already cached that. So it doesn't need to run this again. Only when something relating to this changed, then Pants will have to run everything again. And also if we go here, we'll see that, I think under revision, we'll see that this version is still the same. Where can I see the version? Maybe from the YAML. We'll see that the version is still the same. It hasn't changed. Nothing was redeployed because Google Cloud sees that this is pretty much the same thing. There's no point to redeploy this. But let's change the version. Let's bump it up by maybe 1 and see if the entire process works. So I'll go to my build and I'll bump this up to 1.3, and now we'll see if the entire process runs from top to bottom. So I'll clear this, and I can run this again. So we see this error here saying that this version does not exist. Usually in your CI, you do a build and then you do a publish before it runs. So we'll just do a publish instead. Okay, so we just published this and I already published it. So it just, pretty much didn't bother to build and push everything. And if we go to Google Cloud, and we go to view all products, go to CI/CD, go to our container registry, we'll see the new one that was pushed 1 minute ago, 1.2.3, right? So let's go back to our VS Code. So let's run this now. So the reason why it's taking a while, it's because of the sleep that we have here. Just to show the cache in action. Great, so we see what was able to deploy, and let's go to Google Cloud. So go to our Cloud Run, and then we can check this, and we can check the YAML. We can see, based on the YAML, we see the new version that was bumped up. So we see that when the file changes, then Pants knows to run the entire process and then to do a redeploy, which is great, right? Because now we can have like a large monorepo and we only deploy what has changed. So I'll just clear this and I'll go back to this and do a walkthrough again so we understand what we did. So we created this Adhoc tool, and the purpose of this Adhoc tool is to call the Python file that reads the name of the version of the Docker image that we're building, and then writes it overwrites the name. This it just substitutes this value with the Docker image file and the Docker image repository and the tag or the name of the image, right? And then it it pretty much does this, and then it runs a deploy. As a matter of fact, if we want to get fancy, we can do ncat, this file to see what the content of the file is. Let's run that again. So we can see what the content of the file is, and we see that it just replaced this, and that's what it runs the gcloud information against. The reason why this, if you notice, the reason why it doesn't sleep again for that long is because this is already cached. There is no point to rerun everything from scratch. So this is one of the nice ways that we can use pants to deploy to Cloud Run. So that concludes our video for now. In the next video, we'll go over a few things. So next video, we'll try to do some CI/CD stuff. So I'll come to my README here and I'll do done. So in the next video, we'll set up our CI/CD. We'll use GitLab, and eventually we'll probably use GitHub as well, just for the GitHub users. But we'll use GitLab. We'll set this up in GitLab. Set this up so every time I do a push, the entire pipeline is able to run. And we'll also set up caching strategy there, so we can see pants running in the CI, in real time. We'll also eventually add maybe a Rust project or Java project, one of them. This is just to show that pants actually works with multiple languages. And then we'll have a bonus. So we just have 4 videos to go, and then we'll wrap up this series. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.